Hello, we've made it. Look at us go. Welcome back. In this session today, the topic for today is going to be all about panic attacks. That's the plan. We're going to start with understanding panic attacks, how they might occur as a one-off. So what's going on, what's happening in a panic attack, and then we're going to cover why you might get them recurring. So why might you be stuck in a position where you just keep having panic attacks over and over again? Maybe in specific situations, maybe just seemingly triggered by nothing that you can see. Why might there be recurring things going on there? That's the plan. So let's get stuck straight into it, shall we? First of all, let's start with, as I've said, understanding what's going on in a panic attack. Where we begin with that is, what is the anxiety response? So what's happening in your body when you feel anxious? Because a panic attack typically happens when you're at the top end of the scale. So we've all felt a little bit nervous before. So, worried about a job interview or something, where you might just get a few little physical symptoms like your stomach's kind of churning a little bit, or you're feeling a bit tense. But if we dial that all the way to 8 or 9 or 10 out of 10 anxiety, that is what a panic attack is. So your heart will really be pounding. You might even feel like you can't breathe. Your chest might feel tight. You might feel dizzy. And all of these are quite scary as symptoms. So, first of all, in the anxiety response, your body is getting you ready to run away or to fight, to do something physical. That's the idea. So your heart rate will increase. Your breathing rate will increase, and your body is trying to get oxygen to your muscles. So oxygen into your bloodstream, pump that around your body to get to the muscles. Again, when we think about a panic attack as being like 8, 9, or 10 out of 10 there, your heart will be pounding. If you've ever sprinted, if you've ever just absolutely legged it as fast as you can until your body tells you need to stop, you will be familiar with this feeling. Like, it literally feels like you can't get your breath. Your chest feels so tight that it feels like it can't happen. I recently had this experience actually in a steam room. So I went into a steam room. That's always been fine for me. And then I went in and I just sort of felt like I couldn't quite get my breath. And because I felt like I couldn't get my breath, my body sort of went, hold on, what if you can never breathe again? And then boom, off goes my anxiety response. And then I really feel like I can't breathe, because what's literally happening in my body is my breathing is getting shallower and my heart is beating faster. So it makes the symptoms more intense. So that's why a panic attack might happen as a one-off. I wanted to start here because sometimes a panic attack is the symptom rather than the problem. So you might get panic attacks if you are already very, very anxious on a day-to-day basis about other things. So for example, if you've got health anxiety and you're really worrying about something, and you've been carrying that around all day and your anxiety has just been dialing up and up and up as the day's gone on, you might end up being in a position where you feel so anxious that, again, you feel like you can't breathe, or your chest is too tight, or you're going to pass out. Or it's quite common in things like phobias. So if there's perhaps some claustrophobia, if you find yourself feeling like you're stuck in a small situation that you can't get out of, you might very quickly find your body reacting with this very intense anxiety response and feeling like you're having a panic attack. Or in PTSD, that happens as well. So sometimes the treatment of the panic, if you like, or dealing with the panic, isn't only about working with the panic attacks. It's also understanding, well, what's the underlying anxiety that's bringing this about in the first place? Let's talk now a little bit more about, well, what if the panic seems to be the main thing? I keep having panic attacks, and that's the thing that is on my mind the most. All right, let's flip a flip chart. Here we go. This is our diagram of panic. I am planning on making these into audio only as a little podcast as well. So for those of you that are listening, I'll put a little link to this picture. But let's talk through it first. So the assumption in how panic attacks works, this is the cognitive model broadly of panic attacks, is there will be some trigger. And once you have noticed a physical sensation in your body, and your mind has recognized that as a problem. So, for example, when I said about being in the steam room, I was fine until I noticed that I couldn't get my breath. Once I'd noticed I couldn't get my breath, my mind went, sort of, what if you can never get your breath? What if you can't breathe? And then as soon as that happened, it started the anxiety response. That increases the symptoms. So I get an even tighter chest. I get even shallower breath. My heart is beating even faster. I feel even hotter than I already am. And that means I've really, really got to get out of here. I'm really even more convinced that I can't breathe and that something is going to happen. Maybe that's not conscious. I'm not necessarily thinking, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. To be fair, I was. But even just at a kind of sub or unconscious level, if it feels like this is wrong and something bad is going to happen, the anxiety dials up, and then that's all you can think about. Another example about how, I suppose, a sideways example, this happens in other ways too. So I once went for a job interview, but that I really wanted, but it was a really hot day, and I noticed that I was sweating, and then straight away my mind was like, you will have to shake hands with these people in a minute, and you're sweating, your hands are absolutely dripping. You need to stop sweating. I got really anxious, and then I started sweating some more, and it kind of round and round it goes. Panic really works on that. But the things that your mind is kind of hooking onto are things that feel inherently scary and dangerous. So typically in panic attacks, it's either I'm feeling like I can't breathe, and that in itself is really scary. Maybe I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. So my chest is so tight that it just feels like this is going to be a heart attack, because the symptoms feel very similar. Your skin might be tingly, your chest is really tight, you can't quite get your breath. Maybe you'd be worried that you're going to pass out. That's quite another common fear within recurrent panic. So every time I have a panic attack, sometimes what you might experience is kind of dizziness, which is another one of those classic symptoms of anxiety, particularly when your heart's really pounding, and it can really feel like you're going to pass out. You can get all dizzy and woozy. And sometimes it's not so much that you're worried that something catastrophic is going to happen, like a heart attack, or that you're going to pass out. Sometimes it's more, it's a panic attack. I know what this is, but I just don't want to have one. It's A, it's horrible, and B, what if I embarrass myself? So it's quite common that people might worry about having a panic attack in public situations. So you might be kind of okay when you're at home, but then perhaps if you're in the cinema, or if you're trying to get on a bus or on a train where you can't get off unless you pull the emergency cord, it might be in the back of your mind, what if I had a panic attack now and I needed to get out? That would be bad. It would be embarrassing, but it would also be horrendous for me. So it might be almost that triggers the fear in itself. So the moment you have that thought, you've stepped onto the bus, what if I can't get off? Up goes your anxiety response. Up goes your physical symptoms. And then you're even more convinced that it's going to happen. So of course you don't go, you get off the bus. Of course you do. In terms of what we tend to find ourselves doing to deal with panic attacks when they're happening, most of the time we'll just try and avoid anything that triggers them. Let's talk a little bit now about two types of this form of panic. So there's the panic where it's about heart attacks or passing out. A lot of the time what we will call that is panic. So as opposed to when it's about embarrassing yourself or being trapped, panic with agoraphobia. So panic typically is when you are concentrating on the idea that every time I feel these symptoms, I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. Some of the things you will find yourself doing, if that's how it feels, is you might avoid anything that raises your heart rate. So you might avoid exercise. You might feel like you have to avoid leaving the house because you can't be away from people, because what if I have a heart attack? If they're in your mind, it's not panic. This is, I feel like it's actually going to do me in. Of course you're going to stay at home. Of course you're going to not want to be away from your phone or away from your family or away from your friends, because you'll feel like I need to be around people. And sometimes that's what isolates you. You end up being stuck inside and you can't do anything. So yes, avoiding things where you perhaps raise your heart rate, avoiding being away from other people. You might find other things that you do as well. Typically what we'll reach for in panic is things that help me feel like I'm bringing my symptoms down. So you might find that when you're hot, it's worse. So you might feel like you're always carrying around a cold bottle of water, or you're always cracking the windows in every room you walk into, because the moment you start to feel hot, it starts to feel a bit panicky. And then again, off this cycle goes where I start to feel anxious about, is this going to happen here? And then the symptoms start to increase. So if I can cool myself down, maybe that will be okay. Or sometimes people take like herbal medication, like Rescue Remedy or something like that, to just try and kind of get ahead of it. Also, if it's more about passing out, people have sometimes described to me carrying around food, so Mars bars or a kind of a fizzy drink or something, to feel like maybe it's my blood sugar. So if I carry that around me, maybe that makes me feel better, then I'm not going to pass out. So you might find yourself doing things that just help you feel a little bit safer in the moment. When it's panic with agoraphobia, so when it's not that I'm worried that I'm going to have a heart attack, I'm going to pass out, it's more about, I know it's a panic attack, I just hate having them, and they seem to come up when I'm in a situation where I feel trapped. Queues, cinemas because you have to like push past everybody if I have to get out, right? Queues because I'd have to like drop my shopping and run, and that feels like I'm trapped. Buses, again, because you can't just step off them. I'd have to press the thing, then wait, and that feels quite scary. Then some of the things you might do, again, are you might avoid the situations that make you feel that way, which, again, might be a short-term solution, but long-term might mean that you can't do things that you want to do, actually. Similarly, you might do things that help you just drop your symptoms a bit. So things that help you feel colder, things that help you feel distracted. So having somebody with you, that kind of thing. That is how it works. So just to sort of summarize again, in a panic attack or recurring panic attacks, there will be triggers that are either external triggers. So for example, if you've been having panic attacks on buses or trains or anywhere like that, then that will be a trigger itself. If you ever have to go on a bus or you have to go on a train, that will be a trigger. Straight away, your mind will be going, what if I have a panic attack? What if that's really bad? And that in itself starts to set off the symptoms. Sometimes the trigger is internal. So you might just notice a physical symptom. I'm noticing that my heart rate is high, or I'm noticing that I'm a little bit out of breath. And then straight away, my brain has gone, what if that means you can't breathe? Or what if that means you're going to have a heart attack? And then bosh, off goes my anxiety response. Round and round it goes. Very, very scary. That's how it works. Let's talk about what we do. Let's talk about what we do, because we need to talk about that, right? There are, again, two ways of thinking about this. There's what do we do in the short term to deal with a panic attack when it's happening, if it happens, what can I do to help myself? And some of those things are just understanding, I think, that it's a panic attack and that this is a normal, for want of a better word, a usual part of every human experience that we have an anxiety response. Not everybody has panic attacks, but everybody has experience of some sort of nerves, because that is what our bodies are built to do, is respond to threat by raising our heart rate, raising our breathing rate, making us sweat a little bit to prepare to expend some energy. So knowing that it's your anxiety response, knowing that it's not a heart attack, knowing that it's not that you're necessarily going to pass out, knowing that actually this is anxiety is a good place to start, but it's probably not going to convince you immediately. If somebody's ever having a panic attack and you say, don't worry, it's just a panic attack, you might notice the words themselves don't immediately make them go, cool, I'm fine. But it is still worth just telling yourself about. So even just learning about panic attacks and what they are is a good starting point. However, what you can do to build on that is then say, okay, well, if it's anxiety, what can I do to help myself? And starting to slow down your body can be really helpful. So anytime you come across anything to do with anxiety, people will say breathing techniques, do breathing techniques. They're really helpful. So box breathing, deep breathing, that kind of thing. However, if you have ever found yourself short of breath and worried about being short of breath, and then you've tried to do long, slow, deep breaths, you will know that it doesn't always help. Actually, when you're really conscious of your breath, sometimes it makes you feel even more panicky. That doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do, but it is just a little note to say, when you try and take back control of your breathing, your body will fight you a bit. Your body will fight you a bit, and it might feel really uncomfortable. It might make you feel even more short of breath. It doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do. Trying to slow your body down. Trying to cool yourself down can be helpful too. So using all those things that you're carrying around with you, is not a bad thing. It's okay to do that, to get through something that you want to get through. However, long term, for dealing with panic attacks, what we want is for the bit of your brain that is flagging these symptoms up as a problem, that are saying this is a heart attack, or this is going to do you some damage, or this is going to be horrendous. We want to teach that part of your brain that it's okay, and that actually this is just anxiety. And if we let it, it will just come up and go away like a wave. It will pass like a wave. That's what we want it to know. That's different to trying to tell yourself in your head. You might have already convinced yourself in the head, this is a panic attack. I don't need to worry about this, but that doesn't stop it happening. So the bit that we try and do, or what do we try and do to help somebody, that part of somebody's mind, see that this is okay, we treat it the same way as any kind of phobia or any other kind of fear. We have to face the thing that I'm scared of. So if it was a spider phobia, we would gradually help somebody face spiders. We'd start with a teeny tiny spider, or maybe even a picture of a spider, and we'd help them kind of look at it or hold it in their hand, depending on what they're comfortable with, to the point that it makes them a bit uncomfortable. And then we let them stay with it so that they go, oh no, this is going to be bad. This is going to be bad. Oh no, actually, hold on, nothing's happened. Nothing's happened. I'm okay. Nothing's happened. I'm all right. And we do that repeatedly until their mind can kind of let go of the idea that this thing is dangerous. We've shown it over and over again, repeatedly. Nothing's going to happen. It's going to be okay. We do the same with panic. It's just not as smooth as getting a spider, right? So again, if we think about those two strands, so if you're afraid of having a heart attack or passing out, what we really want is for you to sit with some of the symptoms that you're getting and to show your brain that you are not going to have a heart attack or pass out. Important caveat here, of course, that it is always important to get yourself checked out. Of course it is. If you really are worried that there's a heart problem, of course you should get that checked out. If it's all been checked out and it seems like, no, this looks like it's panic, then what we do is we practice sitting with an elevated heart rate. So if you have avoided for a long time raising your heart rate, what we will do is we'll gradually raise it and then get you to sit with it. Sit with the fear until it passes on its own. Again, showing your mind, this is scary, this is scary, this is scary. Oh no, nothing's happened. Maybe this is okay. Maybe we don't need to run away from this. And we do that repeatedly. In therapy, so if you work with somebody like a cognitive behavioral therapist like me, actually sometimes what we will do is we'll help you take that further and further. So eventually what we will do is we'll help you run on the spot and hyperventilate. So really kind of induce the feeling of being out of breath. Same as if we just asked you to sprint 100 meters. I mean, I'd feel out of breath after that. And then to sit with that and to show your brain, this is okay. You don't need to be afraid of these symptoms. It's a really scary process to go through because any type of facing your fear is like that, but it's really effective and it really, really works. So sitting with the symptoms rather than running away from them. The other things we'll ask you to do is to practice not doing your behaviors that make you feel safe so much anymore. So if you're always carrying a cold bottle of water, for example, what you might be showing yourself is, I can only cope as long as I've got this with me. So if that's restricting you in any way, what we might do is say, okay, well, why don't we practice having it a bit further away? So usually you carry it in your hand. Why don't you put it in your bag? Okay, you've practiced putting it in your bag. You can cope with that now. Why don't we practice leaving it a bit further away when you're feeling like this? That kind of thing. And so that you can gradually face and become more and more comfortable with things that previously were uncomfortable. It's the same when the things that make you panic are social situations. So things like we've said about the cinema or buses or trains or queues and things like that. What we'll do is we'll say, all right, right now you're avoiding them. Of course you are. Why wouldn't you be? It's a horrible, horrible feeling. If you want to get back to a point where these things don't scare you so much anymore, let's face them gradually. So what we might do is we'll draw a list. I'll tell you what, let's draw this out. I like to draw a ladder because this helps me explain it, I think. I think people understand a lot of the time, if you're facing a fear of heights, you don't start on the top rung of the ladder. You climb up the ladder until it becomes uncomfortable, but you reckon you could stay there for a while. And once you've faced, if it's rung number 3, once you've faced that and you've sat with it quite a few times until now that's no longer a problem, then you can move on to rung number 4. We don't just chuck you straight in at the deep end. We reach a point or find the point where it becomes uncomfortable. So with things like buses and trains and things like that, we might say, all right, well, why don't we try a shop first of all? If queues are part of it, why don't we try a shop? Why don't we try a shop at a less busy time of the day where you are allowed to take a friend with you if you want for kind of moral support? Try not to distract yourself by talking to them all the time, but you can take them with you if you want. And then let's see if you can stay there feeling anxious. And then once you feel okay again, or it's started to come down, that anxiety, then you can go. So let's do that. Go shopping centre or something like that, but somewhere that you feel you can handle. That might to you be a shopping centre, or it might be that feels too much. Maybe actually somewhere even less intense, like the lobby of a gym or something like that. The sweet spot is it's making me uncomfortable, but not so uncomfortable that I have to leave. That's the idea. And then we practice going there, and sitting with it. And then you can work your way up. All right, well, I'm still going to go to this busy place, but I'm going to go at a slightly busier time and then see if I can handle that. All right, okay, I've eventually got to a point where that's okay. Let's see if I can step it up a little bit. Maybe I could try a short bus trip. Maybe I could give that a go. And we just gradually take you out of your comfort zone until those things become okay again. The mechanism that we're working with here, the idea of what we're doing is, can I show this part of my brain that is afraid that something really awful is going to happen, that actually it's okay. And I don't need to be afraid of this. That's what exposure therapy does. But also, on a day-to-day basis, while you're having panic attacks, if they're just coming up here and there, breathing techniques, soothing your body, talking to yourself in a soothing way is really helpful. Just slowing things down, bringing your heart rate down can really be useful. I've got one more thing to add on that with kind of breathing exercises, which for me feels quite helpful, particularly for this form of anxiety, which is adding a little bit of imagery to it. So one of my favorite things to think about when I'm trying to calm tension in my body is when I'm breathing in and breathing out is to picture 2 colors. So to picture a very calm color coming in and filling my body. So I like to think about teal. That will be my favorite, teal. So I know it's very specific. It's like a dark turquoise, I think. Teal coming in. And then as I breathe out, it's red that's leaving. That's what it is in my head. It'll be different to other people. So I take a deep breath in and I imagine teal filling my body. And then when I breathe out, the red leaves. And all we're really doing there is just adding a little bit extra, a little kind of cue to my body that I'm doing some deep breaths and I'm attempting to calm my whole body. And that imagery kind of works for me. So I hope that's been a useful rundown of panic attacks and what we do about them, both in the short term, which is slowing things down, and in the long term, which is facing the fear, going gradually further and further outside of your comfort zone. That's what we tend to do. I hope that's been useful, but let me know what you think. Next time, we're going to be doing breaking out of overthinking, and that's going to be next Monday, and that will be for upgraded or paid Substack subscribers. So I'll put in the notes below where you can find all the details for that. But thank you for coming along, and thank you for listening and watching, and look forward to seeing you next time.